David, I am at my absolute limit with my mother living here. The voice that crackled through my smartphone speaker was my daughter's, Claire, but the tone was that of a stranger. It was cold, sharp, and laced with an irritation so profound it seemed to suck the warmth from my small kitchen. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the tea kettle, the water just beginning to hiss. I was 68 years old. My name is Eleanor, and I was listening to a voice message my own daughter had accidentally sent to me, a message clearly intended for her husband. What I heard in the next 90 seconds didn't just break my heart, it atomized it. She is a complete nuisance, David. She gets into everything, she hovers. I can't breathe. And on top of that, we are hemorrhaging money on her. I've been looking into some of those cheaper places, the ones outside the city limits. I found one in Westlake that's only $950 a month. The floor seemed to drop away, leaving me suspended in a nauseating void. This was Claire, my Claire, the child for whom I had scrubbed other people's floors for 30 years, inhaling the scent of bleach and ammonia until it felt like a permanent part of me. The daughter whose college tuition I paid by selling every last piece of jewelry my own mother had left me. The same Claire who had wept in my arms for a week when David, this same David, had left her at the altar the first time, and I had spent my last $5,000 in savings to convince him to come back. My blood ran cold, turning to slush in my veins. But the audio continued, and the ice coalesced into something hard and sharp. Also, I've already checked the house papers. It's all in her name, of course, but I found a way. My cousin Brenda, the one who works at the county clerk's office, is going to help me transfer the title to our name without her even realizing. It's going to cost about $500 in fees and, gratuities, but it's worth it. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone into the sink. My house, the only asset I possessed in the world. The small bungalow in Austin, I had bought brick by brick with the sweat of my brow, working double shifts, cleaning the homes of wealthy tech executives for 3 decades. The house I had just assumed, in my foolish, maternal heart, would be hers one day anyway. But the final blow, the one that extinguished the last ember of maternal denial, was the sound that came next. Laughter. A light, carefree chuckle from my only child. In a month, David, Mom will be settled in the home, and we will own everything. We can finally live our lives in peace without that bitter old woman controlling everything. If you have ever felt the earth disintegrate beneath your feet, if you have ever had the person you love most in the world take a knife and plunge it directly into your back, you will understand the profound, echoing silence that filled my kitchen. But what my daughter Claire and her feckless husband David did not know was that her mother was not the naive, senile old woman they had been painting her to be. And after 68 years on this earth, I have learned that sometimes the only defense against calculated cruelty is a strategy just as cunning. I did not sleep that night. Not 1 minute. The woman who went to bed was a victim, shattered and grieving. The woman who rose at dawn was someone else entirely. I walked to my closet and put on my most elegant crimson pantsuit, a garment I reserved for victory. I gathered my important documents, my bank statements, and my dignity. I left the house with a serene smile on my lips and a plan that would change our lives forever. To understand the depth of that blade, you must understand the life I had poured into her, the sacrifices that were not just costs, but pieces of my own soul. I grew up in a family where love was not a word, it was an action. It was my mother, God rest her soul, working her fingers raw as a seamstress from before the sun rose until long after it set, just to keep food on the table for me and my siblings. We were poor in cash but rich in character. Eleanor, my mother would say, her voice soft but firm as she taught me to mend a seam. In this life, family is the only anchor. And for family, you give until it hurts, and then you give a little more. I was only 19 when I found myself pregnant with Claire. Her father, a charming boy with empty promises, vanished the moment the test turned positive. One night he was swearing eternal love. The next morning his apartment was empty. His parents, wealthy and cold, had slammed the door in my face when I went looking for him, telling me their son wasn't going to have his future, ruined by some girl's mistake. It was my mother who held me as I cried, who wiped my tears and set her jaw. "That child," she told me, her hand on my stomach, "is going to have everything we never did. We will raise her together. We will make her a good woman." My mother sold her only 2 gold bracelets, her own mother's heirlooms, to buy a crib and clothes for the baby. When Claire was born, she was perfect. A tiny, screaming angel with my eyes and a grip that felt like it could hold the world. My mother and I raised her together. I started cleaning houses at 20, earning a pittance, scrubbing toilets and polishing floors in neighborhoods I could never dream of living in. Every single cent was for Claire. I remember the first day of kindergarten. We walked the 2 miles because we couldn't afford bus fare, but her uniform was starched and immaculate. Her shoes shined to a mirror finish. The other mothers arrived in gleaming SUVs, dripping in casual jewelry. I stood there in my threadbare dress, my hands red and raw from the morning's cleaning. I felt so small, so inadequate. But then Claire turned, threw her arms around my legs, and kissed my cheek. "Thank you, Mommy. You're the best mommy in the whole world." In that moment, I knew I would burn the world down for her. The years blurred into a relentless routine. Wake at 4:30 a.m., make Claire's breakfast, walk her to school, clean 3, sometimes 4, houses until 6 p.m., pick her up, help with homework, read her a story, fall into bed with my muscles screaming, only to wake up and do it all again. My mother passed away from pneumonia when Claire was 9, but her final words to me became my mantra. "Eleanor, that child is your legacy. Give her an education, give her love. She will take care of you when you are old. Our blood is good. She will not fail you." Those words were my fuel. When Claire turned 15, I worked 7 days a week for 6 months to throw her the party she deserved. I spent over $3,000, money I had been desperately saving to fix our leaking roof. But seeing her face that night, glowing in a simple golden dress, watching her dance with her friends, it was worth every drop of sweat. "Mom, I don't know how you do this," she whispered to me that night, hugging me tight. "You have almost nothing, but you give me everything. When I grow up, I'm going to give it all back to you, 1,000 times over." She was a brilliant student. Top of her class, lead in the school play. Her teachers adored her. But keeping up was a financial nightmare. Books, uniforms, field trips, technology fees. I took on a 4th house cleaning, working on Sundays, my only day of rest, just to cover the costs. Then came college. The tuition for the state university was $15,000 a year. I earned perhaps $400 a month on a good month. It was impossible, but a mother does the impossible. I took out a loan against my house, the house I was now hearing she planned to steal. I sold the engagement ring her father had given me, the last symbol of my youthful folly. I even sold my mother's antique sewing machine, the one she had used to feed us. "My daughter," I told Claire, the day I dropped her off at the dormitory, my heart swelling with a pride so fierce it physically hurt. "I never got to go to college, but you will be a professional. You will have a degree. You will work in an office with air conditioning, and you will never, ever have to scrub another person's floors." I cried tears of pure joy watching her walk into that administration building. For the next 4 years, I worked like a machine. Claire needed money for textbooks, for projects, for decent clothes, for internships, for social outings with her new, wealthier friends. I gave it all to her, even when it meant I ate nothing but rice and beans for the last week of the month. The day she graduated with a degree in business administration was the proudest day of my life. Seeing her walk across that stage, her cap and gown pristine, hearing her name called, it was as if every sacrifice, every sore muscle, every humiliation had been worth it. She hugged me, crying, "Mom, this degree is as much yours as it is mine. I promise you, now that I'm a professional, you will never have to suffer again." A year later, she met David at her new corporate job. I was thrilled. He was a supervisor at a manufacturing plant, handsome, and seemed to adore her. When he asked for her hand, I wept with joy, believing my daughter would finally have the stable, 2-parent family I could never provide. But the wedding was another financial mountain. Claire wanted the fairy tale. The venue was $8,000. The dress was $2,000. The flowers, the music, the catering. I spent over $10,000 on that wedding, money I had to pull from another loan, further leveraging my only asset. The first few years of their marriage were wonderful. They visited every Sunday. We would have dinner, and Claire always helped me with groceries. "Mom, now that I'm working, I want to take care of you," she would say, pressing $100 bill into my hand. I finally felt it. My mother's words had come true. My sacrifices had paid off. Everything changed 3 years ago. David's plant had massive layoffs, and he lost his job. The financial strain was immediate and crushing. They started asking for money. And I, as always, could not say no. First, it was $1,000 to cover their mortgage, then $2,500 for a down payment on a new car after their old one died, then $3,000 to pay off a spiraling credit card debt. It was after that $3,000 loan that things began to change. It was subtle at first, a series of small, cold drafts in the once warm house of our relationship. I justified it as stress. Financial problems can break even the strongest couple. But now, listening to that horrifying audio message, I understood it wasn't stress, it was calculation. The Sunday visits stopped first. "Mom, we're just so swamped with David's job hunt," Claire would say over the phone, her voice distant. Then the calls became shorter, the excuses more frequent. "I'm in a meeting, Mom. I'm at the grocery store. It's late, we're eating. I'll call you tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Then came the hurtful comments, disguised as concern. "Mom, David and I were talking, and we've noticed you're getting really forgetful lately," she said one day. "Are you sure you're okay living alone in that big house?" I laughed it off, but the seed was planted. One afternoon, I drove to their apartment unannounced, bringing a pineapple upside-down cake, David's favorite. I heard laughter inside, but it took them nearly 5 minutes to answer the door. "Oh, Mom," Claire said, her smile brittle and forced. "What a surprise. We were just organizing some paperwork." Inside, her cousin Brenda, the one from the county clerk's office, was at their dining table, a sheaf of papers spread out. When I walked in, Brenda snatched them up and shoved them into a briefcase. "Hello, Aunt Eleanor," she chirped, with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Just helping Claire with some of David's health insurance forms." But I had seen it. For a fraction of a second, before she hid them, I saw my name and my home address on the top document. Why would my name be on David's health insurance? I asked, genuinely curious. Claire and Brenda exchanged a look, a flicker of something. Annoyance? Panic? I couldn't place it then. "Oh, it's just to update the beneficiaries, in case anything ever happened to us, Mom." "You're our only family," Claire said smoothly. It satisfied me at the time. Then came the deliberate forgetfulness. They would invite me to lunch, and I would arrive at the restaurant to find they weren't there. "Oh, Mom, we forgot to tell you we had to cancel." David had a last-minute interview. This happened 3 times. The 3rd time, I sat alone in that booth for an hour, feeling like an old fool as families laughed and ate around me. They began excluding me from family events. I found out from my neighbor, Mrs. Rose, that they had hosted a large barbecue for David's birthday. "How odd you weren't there, Eleanor," she'd said. "I saw them buying enough meat for 30 people. Claire's excuse? "Oh, Mom, it was just a casual thing with David's work friends. We knew you'd be bored." The final, devastating move came 2 months ago. "Mom, our apartment building needs to fumigate for termites, and they're also repainting the entire complex. We need a place to stay for about a month. Would it be okay if we moved in with you?" "Besides," Claire added, her voice suddenly warm for the first time in ages, "this way we can spend more time together. We can take care of you." I was overjoyed. I thought this was the answer to my prayers, a way to mend the growing distance. I was wrong. It was the beginning of the end. From the day they moved in, my house ceased to be mine. David complained constantly. The television was too old, the internet was too slow, the water pressure in the shower was terrible. "Eleanor, this house needs a ton of work," he'd say, propping his feet on my coffee table. It must be so hard for you to maintain at your age." Claire began reorganizing. "My kitchen, my rules," she'd say, moving my pots and pans. "Mom, these old dishes are depressing. I'm buying us a new set. These clothes in your closet are ancient. Let's just donate them." Slowly, methodically, they were erasing me from my own home. Then came the hushed conversations, the whispers in the kitchen that would stop the second I entered the room. "What are you two talking about?" I'd ask. "Nothing, Mom," Claire would reply. "Just work stuff." One night, I overheard David on the patio. "Yes, we're already here. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Brenda says she can have the paperwork ready in 2 more weeks." When I stepped outside, he claimed he was talking to his boss about a new project. They began to control my finances. "Mom, let us handle the utility bills. You shouldn't have to worry about these things," Claire insisted. It seemed kind, until I realized she was screening all my mail. "Mom, why did you withdraw $200 in cash?" she'd ask, holding my bank statement. "You don't need that much." The most painful part was the narrative they were building. My friend of 40 years, Letitia, came to visit. "Oh, Letitia," Claire said, right in front of me. "Mom has been so confused lately. Just yesterday, she tried to go for a walk at 10 at night, thinking it was morning. It was a complete and utter lie. I had done no such thing. But I saw the look of pity Letitia gave me. Oh, Eleanor, it's a good thing you have Claire to look after you." Then came the specialists. A doctor who was just a friend came to check my blood pressure. A social worker came to evaluate my living conditions, a visit Claire had scheduled. During one visit, I overheard the doctor talking to Claire in the living room. "Ma'am, your mother seems physically healthy, but I will note in the report that she exhibits signs of mild age-related confusion." I was standing in the kitchen, perfectly lucid, listening to this man fabricate a diagnosis that would become my prison sentence. The tension was unbearable. Every day was a new erosion of my independence. "Mom, you shouldn't be driving anymore. Mom, it's better if you don't cook on the hot stove." They were taking my life apart, piece by piece, all while smiling and telling me it was for my own good. And that brought me to this moment. Standing in my kitchen, the tea kettle screaming, my world reduced to the cold, cruel words on that voice message. "Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. She's a total nuisance. I found one on the outskirts that only costs $950 a month." Carol already explained how we can transfer it to our name without her realizing, the director of the Street Francis home. I told him my mother has early-stage dementia. "Next Tuesday, we're going to tell her she has a routine medical appointment. By the time she realizes what happened, she'll already be inside, and we'll have legal guardianship." The plan was perfect. It was meticulous, and it was pure evil. "The best part of all," Claire's voice continued, a sickening brightness in it, "is that she'll never suspect a thing. She still thinks we're the perfect children. She still says, 'Thank you for taking care of me, honey,' when I bring her breakfast in bed. If she only knew I'm just keeping her calm while I prepare her funeral in life." A funeral in life. With the $520,000 the house is worth, we can pay off all our debts, buy a new car, and finally take that trip to Europe. And the best part, David? No more pretending. No more Sundays choking down her horrible pot roast. No more listening to her boring, repetitive stories from when she was young. My pot roast, my stories. In a month, Mom will be in the home and we'll own everything. We can finally live in peace. Besides, the life insurance policy she has is in our name, so if something unfortunate were to happen to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be the worst thing. The message ended with a click. They wanted my house, they wanted my freedom, and they wouldn't be sad if they got my life insurance payout too. I sat on the cold kitchen floor for hours. The sun set, casting long, mournful shadows across the linoleum. The grief that washed over me was a physical weight, crushing my chest. But as the darkness deepened, something else rose from the ashes. It was a cold, hard substance I hadn't felt in years. It was rage. Pure, clarifying, righteous rage. My daughter had mistaken my kindness for weakness. She had mistaken my sacrifice for stupidity. She had fundamentally underestimated the woman who had clawed her way out of poverty to give her a life. At 5 a.m., I rose. I bathed and dressed in my crimson suit. I was not a victim. I was a warrior. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and all my financial documents. I left a simple note on the kitchen table. Left early for some personal errands. Back this afternoon. Love, Mom. My first stop was the bank. I was waiting on the steps when the doors opened at 8 a.m. Mrs. Peterson, the branch manager who had known me for 20 years, greeted me warmly. "Good morning, Eleanor. You're here bright and early." "Good morning, Nora," I said, my voice firm. "I need to review all transactions on my account for the past 6 months. I also need to change the beneficiaries on all my accounts and my life insurance policy, effective immediately. And I need to know if anyone has attempted to access my information." Nora's professional smile faltered, replaced by a frown of concern as she typed, "Well, Eleanor, I do have several inquiries logged here from your daughter, Claire." She presented a letter, signed by you, authorizing her to review your statements to, as she put it, help you with your finances. My blood turned to ice. "Nora, I never signed any such letter. Please, show me that document." When she produced it, my stomach churned. The signature was a forgery, a good one, but flawed. The E in Eleanor was too looped, too flamboyant. Claire had always had a flair for the dramatic. "This is a forgery," I said, sliding my driver's license across the desk. "Compare the signatures. My daughter has been committing fraud. I need you to immediately revoke all access and place a high-security alert on my accounts." Nora turned pale. "Eleanor, this is incredibly serious. We will lock the account down immediately. I recommend you file a fraud report." "That is exactly what I am doing," I replied. "But first, I want to transfer my entire savings, all $9,200, to a new account that only I can access. And the beneficiary of my life insurance? I want it changed to the Austin Seniors Foundation." For the next hour, Nora worked quickly, her face a mask of grim efficiency. I walked out of that bank feeling the first small flicker of power return. Claire would not get another cent. My second stop was the Travis County Clerk's office, where my niece, Brenda, worked. I walked in without an appointment, a small digital recorder tucked into my purse, already running. "Brenda, sweetheart," I said, beaming, as if it were the most pleasant surprise. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop in." Her reaction was everything I needed to see. The color drained from her face, and her hands visibly trembled as she tried to cover some documents on her desk. "Aunt Eleanor, what? What are you doing here? Claire didn't say you were coming." "Oh, I just had a few questions, dear," I said, leaning casually against the counter, my voice dripping with false naivete. "Claire mentioned you were helping her with some of my insurance paperwork, and I'm just so confused by it all. Could you explain to me what documents you need my name on?" Brenda began to sweat. Well, Auntie, it's just routine updates for the county registry, property taxes and such." Her voice cracked. "Brenda," I said, my voice dropping, losing all its warmth. "I know exactly what you and Claire have been planning. I know about the forged documents. I know about the plan to steal my house. And I know you have been using your position here to help her create a false paper trail." I pulled my phone from my purse, but I didn't play the audio. I just held it. "I have evidence of everything." Brenda slumped into her chair as if her bones had dissolved. "Aunt Eleanor, I didn't want to. Claire said you weren't well. She said you were confused, that it was for your own good." "It was for money, Brenda. Don't you dare lie to me and say it was for my good," I snapped. "Now, you have two options. You can help me reverse every fraudulent action you've taken, or I can walk directly into your supervisor's office and play him the evidence of you conspiring to commit felony fraud against a senior citizen." Tears streamed down her face. "Please, Auntie, don't. I'll lose my job. I have 3 kids." She confessed everything. She told me how they had fabricated the medical reports, how Claire had promised her $2,000 once the house was sold, how they plan to file for an emergency guardianship next Tuesday. "All right, Brenda," I said, the recorder capturing every sob. "You are going to give me copies of every single fraudulent document you created. You are going to invalidate every single filing you've made. And then you are going to write a full confession. If you do that, I will not press criminal charges against you today." For the next 2 hours, a terrified Brenda did exactly as I said. I walked out with a thick folder of evidence, including the fake medical reports and the falsified guardianship papers they had been preparing. My third and final stop was the law office of Arthur Hayes, the most ruthless and respected civil litigator in Austin. "Mr. Hayes," I said, placing the folder, the phone, and the recorder on his polished mahogany desk, "I am here to stop a fraud and protect my assets." For an hour, he reviewed everything in silence. The audio message, Brenda's recorded confession, the bank forgery, the fake medical reports. Finally, he looked up at me over his glasses, his expression not one of pity, but of cold admiration. "Mrs. Vance," he said, using my married name, "this is one of the cleanest cases of elder fraud and conspiracy I have ever seen. We have more than enough to pursue criminal charges. But tell me, what, exactly, is your desired outcome?" "I want justice, Mr. Hayes," I replied. "But more than that, I want my daughter to learn that actions have consequences. For 68 years, I have been too kind, too forgiving. It is time for someone to defend me." Mr. Hayes smiled, a thin, sharp smile. "Mrs. Vance, we are going to prepare a legal strategy that will not only protect you, but will send a very clear message." We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing a civil lawsuit for fraud, falsified documents, and attempted illegal appropriation. We also prepared a criminal complaint to be filed against both Claire and David. When I returned home that evening, I was exhausted, but I was whole. I was no longer the victim. I was in control. Claire and David were in the living room, watching my television, acting as if nothing was wrong. "Hi, Mom," Claire said, that painfully fake smile plastered on her face. "How were your errands?" "Very productive, sweetheart," I replied calmly. I took care of exactly what I needed to. I sat in my favorite armchair and looked at them. "By the way, we have some visitors coming tomorrow morning. Around 10. I hope you'll both be here." "What visitors, Mom?" David asked, not looking up from his phone. "Oh, you'll see," I said with a serene smile. "They're just some people who are going to help us clarify a few important things about this family's future." That night, I slept like a stone. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. "I'll get it," I called out, rising before Claire or David could move. At my door stood Arthur Hayes, 2 uniformed police officers, and a public notary. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Hayes said briskly. "We are here to execute the orders we discussed." Claire and David appeared in the hallway, their faces a mask of confusion. "Mom? What is this?" Claire asked, her eyes wide. "Who are these people?" "Sit down," I said, my voice carrying an authority they had never heard. "It's time for you to understand the truth." Mr. Hayes cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Miss Claire Matthews and Mr. David Matthews, I am here on behalf of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. We have discovered irrefutable evidence of your conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of documents, and attempted illegal appropriation against her." The color drained from their faces. "What are you talking about?" Claire stammered. "We would never." "Claire," I said, holding up my phone, "would you like me to play the voice message you accidentally sent me on Tuesday? The one where you call me a bitter old woman and detail your plan to put me in a home and steal my house?" I saw the moment she understood. It wasn't anger or sadness in her eyes. It was pure, unadulterated panic. Her perfect plan, undone by a simple technological error. "Turn that off!" she shrieked, lunging for my phone. But one of the officers stepped calmly in her path. "That's private. You have no right." "Relax, honey," I said, my voice chillingly calm. "This is just the beginning. Sit down and listen to the future you planned for me." I pressed play. My daughter's voice filled the living room. "Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. I found one that only costs $950 a month." Carol already explained how we can transfer the house to our name. I told him my mother has early-stage dementia. "This is a setup," David yelled, jumping to his feet. "You're manipulating her. She's confused." Mr. Hayes smiled his thin smile. "Mr. Matthews, we haven't even gotten to the most interesting parts." He placed a document on the coffee table. "This is the full, signed confession of Miss Brenda Rodriguez, your cousin, detailing exactly how you pressured her to forge official documents and create fraudulent medical reports in exchange for a $2,000 bribe." "Brenda is a liar!" Claire screamed, desperation creeping in. "She's just trying to save her own skin." "Oh, really?" I asked, pulling the small digital recorder from my suit pocket, because I also have our entire conversation from her office yesterday recorded. I pressed play. Brenda's sobbing confession filled the room. "Claire told me you couldn't take care of yourself. She showed me how to forge the signature. She promised me $2,000. David sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. "This is a nightmare," he muttered. "It just got out of control." "No, David," I said firmly. "This is justice. The nightmare was me, living in my own home like a prisoner, listening to you plot my funeral in life." Mr. Hayes continued, relentless. "We also have the fraudulent medical reports you commissioned." He held them up. "However, Mrs. Vance voluntarily underwent a full psychological evaluation yesterday with Dr. Raymond Morales, chief of geriatrics at Street David's. He pulled out the official report. The results show Mrs. Vance is in perfect mental condition, with a cognitive clarity superior to the average for her age. This proves your reports were fabricated specifically for the purpose of committing fraud." Claire finally broke. The tears came, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of a cornered animal. "Mom, please," she pleaded, crawling toward me. "We just wanted to take care of you. We were worried. We thought it would be better for you to be in a place where you could be looked after." "Take care of me?" I asked, letting out a short, bitter laugh. "By stealing my house? By lying about my mind? By planning to institutionalize me against my will?" I stood up and looked down at her. "Claire, in that message, you also mentioned you wouldn't be sad if I died, so you could collect my life insurance." "I never said that!" she screamed. I rewound the audio and played that exact part. Besides, the life insurance policy she has is in our name, so if something unfortunate were to happen to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be the worst thing. The silence that followed was heavy and sickening. Even the officers looked disgusted. "And there's more," Mr. Hayes said. "We also have bank records showing that for the last 6 months, Miss Matthews has been illegally accessing and withdrawing funds from her mother's accounts, totaling $9,200. "That was for house expenses," David protested weakly. "We were paying for food." "A lie," I said. "I was still paying all my own bills with my pension. That money you stole was for your new clothes, your expensive dinners, your car payments." "Enough," I finally said, the composure I had held on to finally cracking. I looked directly at my daughter. "You know what hurts the most, Claire? It's not the house. It's not the money. It's that for all these months, while I was hugging you, telling you I loved you, you were looking at me and calculating how much you could make from my death." "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she wailed. "We were just so desperate. We have so much debt. We didn't know what to do." "Desperation does not justify betrayal," I said, my voice hard again. "You could have asked me. My entire life, I have given you everything. But instead of trusting my love, you chose to try and destroy me." One of the officers stepped forward, handcuffs in his hand. "Mrs. Vance, do you wish to proceed with the arrests?" I looked at my daughter, my only child, sobbing on the floor. For a fleeting second, my heart ached. But then I remembered her laughter on the audio. I remembered funeral in life. "Yes, officer," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Proceed." Watching them lead my daughter and son-in-law out of my home in handcuffs was the most painful moment of my 68 years. But as the front door closed, and the silence of my house enveloped me, I did not feel grief. I felt peace. I had finally protected myself. But the battle was far from over. Claire and David, out on bail, launched a campaign of terror. They created fake social media profiles, joining neighborhood Facebook groups to post stories about me. My mother, Eleanor Vance, is suffering from severe dementia. She has falsely accused us of theft. She is a danger to herself. If you see her, please call us. The calls started. Strangers, filled with misguided righteousness, calling me at all hours. You're a monster. How can you do that to your own daughter? You're a sick old woman. Anonymous letters began to arrive, filled with poison. You failed as a mother. You raised a child who hates you. You deserve to die alone. One night, reading a letter that called me an insufferable old hag, I broke. I sat on my kitchen floor and wept, doubting everything. Had I been too harsh? Had I destroyed my own family? Then, I remembered. I went to my bedroom, to the small cedar chest where I kept my treasures. At the very bottom, beneath my mother's wedding ring, was a letter she had written to me before she died. My dearest Eleanor, it read, her handwriting shaky. I am so proud of the mother you are. But remember, if anyone ever tries to take advantage of your good heart, you must be strong. Do not let anyone, not even your own blood, trample on your dignity. True love never seeks to destroy. It never seeks to steal. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. If someone cannot give you that, they do not deserve you. I read it 3 times. My mother's wisdom, reaching across the decades, gave me the strength I needed. True love does not destroy. The next day, I called Mr. Hayes. They are offering a settlement, he said. They will return the money, pay damages, and sign a restraining order if you drop the criminal charges. I accept, I said, but with one condition. I want a full, public confession and retraction, published in the same forums where they slandered me. A week later, they signed. I received my $9,200 plus $15,000 in damages. But more importantly, the public confession was posted. We, Claire and David Matthews, admit to falsely accusing Eleanor Vance of mental instability. We admit to a plan to defraud her. Mrs. Vance is in perfect mental condition, and all of our stories were fabrications. My reputation was restored, but I was not finished. My first act was to change my will. Mr. Hayes, I want my entire estate, including this house, valued at $520,000, to be left to the Austin Seniors Foundation, I said. I want my legacy to help people who truly need it, not ungrateful children. My second act was to move. I sold the house, that beautiful bungalow now tainted by betrayal. I bought a small, bright 2-bedroom apartment in a lovely senior living community for $85,000. My third act was, as a responsible citizen, to send an anonymous tip to the IRS. I enclosed proof that David and Claire had been living far beyond the meager income they had been reporting for 3 years. The subsequent audit found they owed over $35,000 in back taxes and penalties. They had to sell their car and take out high-interest loans to avoid jail. My fourth act was to send my entire file on Brenda to the county supervisor. Brenda was fired, and the resulting internal investigation uncovered a ring of similar frauds, saving several other seniors from my fate. My final revenge was simply watching the natural consequences unfold. Claire was demoted at her job. Her company could not have a person convicted of fraud in a leadership position. David's promotion was given to someone else. Their friends, disgusted by the public confession, abandoned them. Greed had cost them everything. About 6 months after I moved, I ran into Claire at the grocery store. She looked tired, haggard, older. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "Please, forgive me. We've lost everything. Our credit is ruined. We're broke. Isn't that punishment enough?" I looked at her, not with hatred, but with a new, clear-eyed detachment. "I didn't punish you, Claire. Your own actions did. You made your choices. I simply made mine." "But we're family," she pleaded. "Blood is blood." "Blood is not a license for cruelty," I replied calmly. "For 35 years, I was your mother. For 3 months, you were my executioner. You cannot ask me to forget that." "So you'll never forgive me?" she whispered. I've already forgiven you, Claire, I said, and it was the truth. Forgiving you was necessary for my own peace, but forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. It does not mean I will ever trust you again. It does not mean I will allow you back into my life. I wish you well, but my life is finally at peace without you. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the aisle. Today, at 69, my life is fuller than I ever imagined. I teach a painting class at my new complex. I volunteer at the foundation, using my story to help other seniors identify and fight elder abuse. My new friends, Nora and Letitia, are my chosen family. Last month, I received a letter from Claire. She has been in therapy. She wrote that she finally understands her actions were born not of desperation, but of a deep, selfish entitlement. She said she was sorry. She didn't ask to see me. I wrote back a simple card. I am glad you are healing. I hope you find peace. I have learned the hardest lesson of all. True love is not about endless, thankless sacrifice. It is not about enduring abuse in the name of family. True love must be balanced with self-respect. Setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. I spent 68 years being a mother. I will spend the rest of my life being Eleanor, and I have found that she is a woman I quite like. I am strong. I am dignified. And I am, for the first time in my entire life, completely and truly free.